Her in-laws threw her out the very night her husband died in a car crash. They banned her from his funeral, erased her name from the obituary, and even mailed back the wedding ring, without a word. But just 2 years later, the very same family came crawling back, dragging her into court to seize control of the empire she had built from nothing, the very dream they once mocked as a childish fantasy. A woman once treated as an outsider now stands at the center of a brutal legal war, where family ties collide with greed and ambition. Will she forgive, fight back, or simply disappear on her own terms? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories you won't want to miss. Isabella Tran stood in front of the full-length mirror in her Austin penthouse, adjusting the lapel of her crisp ivory blazer. The morning sunlight filtered in through the glass walls, casting long streaks of gold across the hardwood floors. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp, poised, unreadable. To the world, she was a self-made powerhouse, founder and CEO of Freight Flow Systems, one of the fastest-growing logistics tech startups in the country. But behind the immaculate appearance was a woman still learning how to grieve with her teeth clenched. Today marked 2 years since the funeral she wasn't allowed to attend. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and checked her phone. 3 new emails, 1 media inquiry, 1 investor update, and then the one message that made her chest tighten. Isabella, call me ASAP. It's urgent. Nina Rodriguez, attorney. Isabella's thumb hovered over the screen. Nina wasn't someone who used the word urgent lightly. Her background as a former federal prosecutor meant every syllable came weighed with gravity. Isabella inhaled, hit the dial icon, and walked to the window as the line connected. Rodriguez, came the clipped, no-nonsense voice. It's me, Isabella. What's going on? A beat. Then Nina exhaled, slowly. They're filing. Douglas and Evelyn Dalton, they're petitioning the court. They're claiming you're emotionally unfit to manage your estate and are requesting to be appointed temporary conservators. Isabella's throat dried. You're joking. I wish I was. There was a long silence on the line. Outside, the skyline of Austin glittered. Cranes, rooftops, endless construction, the modern American cathedral of ambition. Inside, Isabella leaned her forehead against the cool glass. They're saying I'm what? Crazy? Overworked, isolated, depressed. There's a psychiatric report involved, unsigned but enough to convince a judge to review. They're asking for emergency conservatorship on the grounds that you might be a danger to yourself and your assets. Isabella let out a short, sharp laugh, not of humor, of disbelief. They never even let me into the memorial, never said a word after the crash. And now they want to protect me? They don't want to protect you, Nina said flatly. They want a piece of what you built, and they're disguising it as concern. Isabella didn't speak for a while. Her eyes drifted to the far corner of the room where a framed photograph of Andrew sat beside an unlit candle. It was the only thing she'd brought from their old home. Andrew, soft-eyed, kind, conflicted. He loved her in the way a man tries to love while still obeying a father he can't stop fearing. And now he was gone. Isabella pulled herself upright. Her voice was steady, cold, quiet. File a response. Whatever they submit, we counter. I want every email Evelyn ever sent me, every voicemail, every transaction they made in Andrew's name. I'm already on it, but Isabella, what? They're not bluffing. Evelyn hired a legal team out of Houston, and they played dirty. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Isabella ended the call and stood in silence. The city pulsed beneath her feet, a reminder of everything she'd built from zero.
Her first prototype was sketched in the margins of a napkin. Her first warehouse deal was negotiated from a cafe bathroom because she didn't have office space. She had worked through grief, through silence, through rejection. And now the family who disowned her, the ones who said she was just a passing phase in Andrew's life, wanted to claim power over her mind, her assets, her name. She smiled faintly. They think I'll break. She turned away from the window, her heels clicking across the floor like gunfire on marble. Let them come.
They say the hardest part of marriage is compromise. For me, it was invisibility. The first time I met Evelyn Dalton, she didn't look me in the eye. She extended her hand with a smile that never touched her pupils and said, "You're very poised." It sounded like an insult dressed in pearls. Her husband, Douglas, gave me a firm handshake like I was interviewing for a job I'd already been disqualified from. I was 27, already profitable, and had just closed my Series A. But to them, I was a girl with a foreign name and no pedigree. Andrew stood beside me, silent. He always was when it came to his parents. The Daltons lived in a colonial mansion outside Houston. White columns, black-tie dinners, family portraits spanning generations. I didn't see a single person of color in any of them. They served shrimp cocktails in crystal goblets and called it casual. At dinner, Evelyn asked me if my parents spoke English. I told her they owned a coffee shop in Pflugerville and put 3 kids through college. She smiled again, that same polite, tight-lipped stretch, and said, "That's lovely. The American dream." Andrew tried. He did. When we were alone, he'd pull me close and whisper, "Ignore them. They'll come around." But they never did. When we got married, Evelyn wore navy instead of black, but it felt like mourning anyway. We moved into a townhome 2 hours away from them. I ran my company from the kitchen table, stacking shipments next to the stove, while Andrew drove to the Dalton construction headquarters every day. He worked in procurement. His father gave him a title, a salary, and a leash. At night, he'd come home tired. I'd still be typing. He'd kiss my cheek and ask, "Did you eat?" I'd say yes, even when I hadn't. I didn't want to add weight to his day. He never told me to stop, but he never joined in either. He was raised to be a supporter, not a partner, and I had no time to explain the difference. One evening, I landed a 6-figure logistics deal with a retail chain in Chicago. I opened a bottle of champagne, laid out takeout on the floor, and waited. When he walked in, I jumped up grinning. "We did it," I said, waving the contract. "Freight Flow's first major account." "That's amazing, babe," he said. Then added, "Guess what? Dad's thinking of expanding to Dallas. He wants me to lead the project." I nodded, said congratulations, and we both ate in silence. It was always like that. Parallel success stories. 2 trains running next to each other, never quite touching. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't dismissive. He just wasn't there. And maybe that was worse. The first time Evelyn asked him to talk to me about changing my last name, I was in the next room. I heard every word. She said, "It's confusing, Andrew. People keep asking if she's your wife or your assistant." Andrew didn't answer, but the next morning he left a note by the coffee machine. It said, "Just think about it, okay?" I never brought it up again. When I got featured in Tech South magazine, Evelyn mailed me a copy with a sticky note on the cover. It said, "Nicely done. You photograph well." At their Christmas party, I stood next to Andrew while people asked what I did. I told them I ran a logistics tech firm. One man raised his eyebrows and said, "Isn't that kind of heavy for a lady?" Evelyn laughed before I could respond. I laughed too, but not with her. The night Andrew died, he was driving back from a late meeting with his father. It was raining. A semi jackknifed on the freeway. They said it was quick, clean. At the hospital, I held his hand for 5 minutes before they asked me to leave. The nurse said, "His parents are on their way. They'll want some privacy." I didn't argue. I walked to the parking lot and sat in my car for 2 hours.
It was silent. The kind of silence that swallows you whole. When the obituary was published 3 days later, my name wasn't in it. Andrew James Dalton, beloved son of Douglas and Evelyn Dalton, devoted employee, taken too soon. Nothing else. No mention of the woman he married, no mention of the life we built in the margins of his family script. I folded the paper, placed it on the kitchen counter, and went back to work.
The service was set for Saturday morning. I found out from a LinkedIn post. One of Andrew's coworkers shared a photo of him in a suit and tie, smiling with a caption that read, "Rest in peace, brother." The Daltons are holding a private service this weekend. I called Evelyn. She didn't answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I drove to the funeral home anyway. Black dress, low heels, hair pulled back. I clutched the same envelope I brought to every investor pitch. Inside was our marriage certificate, a copy of our joint lease, and a photo of us cutting cake on our wedding day. There was a man in a suit at the entrance. Security. Hired for privacy, I assumed. "I'm Andrew's wife," I said, holding out the papers. He didn't even look. He said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, family only." I blinked. I didn't cry. Not then. Just nodded, stepped back, and sat down on the curb across the street. I stayed there the entire service, watching black cars pull in, watching people hug, watching them bury my husband while pretending I didn't exist. A white rose wreath hung on the door, with a silver ribbon that read, "Beloved son." There was no mention of husband, no mention of me. Afterwards, Douglas and Evelyn walked out, arm in arm. She wore a black veil. He looked straight ahead. They didn't see me, or maybe they did. It didn't matter. A week later, a package arrived. No return address. Just a small velvet box. Inside was Andrew's wedding ring. No note, just the ring. I turned it over in my palm. The engraving inside still read, "Yours always." I placed it next to mine in a drawer I wouldn't open again for a long time. The next day, I got a letter. Certified mail. Legal envelope. Dear Mrs. Tran, per the Dalton family estate guidelines, we request the return of the following items: the heirloom cufflinks gifted to Andrew at his graduation, the navy pea coat custom-made in Florence, and the wedding ring belonging to the Dalton lineage. These items are part of the family trust. There was no please, no signature, just the Dalton logo at the top of the letterhead. I didn't reply. I boxed everything they listed and mailed it to their lawyer's office with no return address. And then I changed the locks. No one called, no one checked in. Andrew's friends disappeared like smoke. Even the neighbor across the hall stopped making eye contact. I sat in silence for a long time, the kind that stretches into weeks. My inbox overflowed. My team kept building, but I didn't answer. Not until one night, 3 weeks later, I opened my laptop and stared at the screen for 4 hours straight. Then I wrote a new roadmap. Freight flow would pivot, expand, double the contracts by Q2. I worked in silence, ate in silence, slept in shifts. And for the first time in months, I felt something move inside me. Not joy, not purpose. Something sharper, quieter, like steel. 3 months later, Freight Flow signed a multi-million-dollar partnership with one of the largest retail chains in North America. I posted a short statement online. To my team, thank you. To my partner, gone too soon, you believed in me when no one else did. To the rest, silence is a kind of answer. I didn't mention his last name. I didn't need to. They'd already erased me. So, I made sure they couldn't ignore me again. The first Monday after the funeral, I went back to the office. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else to go. It wasn't really an office back then, just a 1-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop in East Austin. The second bedroom had no bed, Just whiteboards, boxes of prototypes, cables, invoices, old routers stacked against the wall like Jenga blocks. My team worked remotely. I was the only one who stayed late. I sat at my desk, stared at the screen, and opened the freight flow dashboard. Orders pending, fulfillment gaps, bugs in the route optimizer. I didn't feel anything, just stared, like a ghost trapped inside a product roadmap. That night, I didn't go to bed. I didn't eat. I wrote 3 new algorithms and fixed a broken GPS sync module we'd been struggling with for weeks. When the sun came up, I looked at the window and whispered, "You better wake up, Tran, because nobody's coming." And I didn't stop. I signed 3 new small business clients in the first month. They weren't glamorous. One was a local butcher, the other a flour distributor. But they trusted me. I told them, if I don't deliver, you don't pay. I always delivered. The 4th week, I pitched a mid-sized grocer chain in Oklahoma. I drove there myself, in the middle of a thunderstorm, wore the same black dress from the funeral because I hadn't gone shopping since. I stood in a conference room, hair soaked, shoes muddy, and told them the truth. My name is Isabella Tran. I lost my husband 3 months ago. I run this company alone. I don't have a board, I don't have a backer, but I know how to move freight faster than anyone you've met. Give me 2 weeks, and I'll shave 15% off your distribution costs. They gave me a shot. We went live the next quarter, and we crushed it. Word spread, quietly. Freight flow wasn't flashy. We didn't do press. But clients came back, referred others. Logistics isn't sexy, but when you save people time and money, they remember. I still ate dinner alone. Microwave noodles, gas station burritos, sometimes nothing at all. I lost weight, got paler, my hair started to fall out. I didn't care. I just worked. I missed Andrew, but only in flashes. The way his hand rested on the back of my neck when I leaned into him on the couch. The half smile he gave when I got fired up in board meetings. He never matched my fire, but he didn't try to put it out either. The rest, the Daltons, the funeral, the cold stares, blurred like background static. All that stayed sharp was the work. By the end of year 1, Freight Flow had 12 clients and steady cash flow. I upgraded the apartment to a real office, painted one wall yellow. Not for branding, just to prove I could change something. I hired a COO, a legal counsel, a product manager. Then I fired the first 2 and hired better ones. My standards grew sharper than my grief. On the first anniversary of Andrew's death, I lit a candle. No service, no prayer, just silence. And then I went back to the desk and kept typing. The grief never really left. It just learned how to sit quietly while I worked. I didn't build a company because I was strong. I built it because falling apart wasn't an option.
The first headline came on a Tuesday morning. Dalton Construction under federal review for misallocated funds. I read it while eating cold eggs in the back of an Uber on the way to a supplier meeting. I didn't react, just kept scrolling. The article was brief. Audit discrepancies, delays on multiple commercial projects, anonymous sources citing internal disarray. No mention of Andrew, no mention of me. A week later, another story hit. CEO Douglas Dalton steps down amid financial turmoil. I paused that time. The photo showed Douglas standing at a podium, face drawn, jaw tight. Evelyn was nowhere in the frame. I stared at the picture for a long time, then flipped to the next email and moved on. By quarter 2, I started hearing whispers. Vendors who once bragged about their Dalton contracts were suddenly looking for alternatives. A project manager from one of their subsidiaries reached out on LinkedIn, said he admired my work, asked if we were hiring. I didn't answer.
Then one afternoon, as I was reviewing logistics reports from our Atlanta pilot, my office manager buzzed in. "Someone dropped this off for you," she said. No name. It was a bouquet. White lilies, tied in satin ribbon. No card, just a single line handwritten on vellum paper. "Thinking of you always, Evelyn." I threw it in the trash. That same week, I got a voicemail. "Isabella, hi, it's Evelyn. I hope you're well. I've been meaning to reach out. Things have been difficult lately. We'd love to see you. Maybe dinner sometime. Just us girls. No pressure. Call me when you're free." I stared at my phone for 5 minutes, then blocked the number. 3 days later, a new number texted me. "Isabella, it's Douglas. We're truly sorry for everything. You've done remarkable things. Andrew would be proud. We'd like to reconnect. If you're open to that. No agenda. Just family." Family. They used the word like it meant something, like it hadn't been weaponized. I didn't reply. The following Monday, I walked into a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. The barista handed me my drink with a note taped to the side. It read, "Let us make things right, please." They were trying every angle. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, ring in my hand. Not the heirloom they made me return, the simple one Andrew had given me privately, engraved with a line from my favorite book. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. I remembered the night he gave it to me. Just us. No fanfare. He said, "This one's just from me. Not the family, not the name, just me." I knew then what I had to do. I called Evelyn the next day. Calm, direct. "You asked for dinner," I said. "Let's have it." We met at a bistro in downtown Austin. She wore cream, as always, the same pearls. She smiled too much, kept touching her napkin. The waitress brought wine. Evelyn insisted on ordering for us both. "It's so good to see you," she said. "I've missed you." I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. Not once. She said she'd been reflecting, that she'd made mistakes, that grief made people act cold, that maybe it was time to start over. Then she leaned forward, voice softer. "We heard freight flows expanding again. Into Europe, right? That's incredible. You're incredible. And I just thought maybe there's room for reconnection." I set down my glass. "There's not." Her face froze. "You had your chance. You made your choice. I respected it. Now respect mine." I stood up, laid a 20 on the table, and walked out. I didn't look back.
They sent a formal invitation this time. Heavy cardstock, gilded border, handwritten envelope. "Mrs. Isabella Tran, you are cordially invited to dinner at the Dalton residence, Saturday at 7 p.m. We would be honored by your presence." There was no RSVP line, just a phone number and Evelyn's script. It looked like an apology, read like a setup. I stared at it for an hour before deciding, if they wanted theater, I'd bring the spotlight. Saturday came with rain. I pulled into the driveway of their estate just before sunset. Same red brick mansion, same trimmed hedges. But something was different. The windows looked dimmer. The lawn hadn't been edged. A single light flickered above the garage. Douglas opened the door himself. No butler this time. "Isabella," he said, forcing a smile. "You look strong." He moved aside to let me in. Evelyn waited in the foyer, her perfume thick in the air. She wore navy this time, no pearls. She stepped forward, arms open, like we were actresses in a family drama only she believed was still on script. "Thank you for coming, darling, truly." I said nothing. The dining room was set like it always had been. Long oak table,
crystal glassware, candles flickering at perfect angles, silverware that hadn't been used since their last gala. She made roast duck. Douglas poured wine. They insisted on prayer before eating. I bowed my head out of habit, not belief. Dinner started with small talk. "How's business? We've been following your success. Andrew would be so proud." Each phrase thrown like bait, wrapped in nostalgia. I chewed slowly, measured every word. "Business is growing," I said. "We signed 3 new distribution contracts last week." "That's incredible," Douglas said. "Logistics is no joke, especially now." Evelyn smiled. "I always knew you had it in you, even when things were complicated." I tilted my head. "You mean when you had me escorted out of the funeral?" Her fork paused mid-air. Douglas cleared his throat. "That wasn't personal," he said. "We were grieving. We didn't think—" "You did think. You thought I didn't belong. And now I do." The silence stretched. Evelyn tried again. "We were hoping we could turn a new page." I nodded. "Of course." Her face lit up. Douglas leaned forward. "In fact," I said, "I've been thinking about offloading a few shares, unrelated to freight flow, just some legacy holdings Andrew had from an old fund. You remember the Phoenix account?" Douglas blinked. "The Phoenix? Andrew's? No, we never— that wasn't part of—" Evelyn's smile faltered. "Gotcha." I leaned back. "There is no Phoenix account, no shares. Just wanted to see which of you flinched first." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. That was cruel. "No," I said. "Cruel was pretending I didn't exist for 5 years. Cruel was mailing me Andrew's ring with no note. Cruel was calling me after 2 years of silence because your empire cracked and you smelled leverage." She said nothing. Douglas spoke quieter now. "We're just trying to find our family again." "You lost it the day you erased me from his name." I stood. The table shook slightly as I pushed back my chair. I walked to the foyer, grabbed my coat, and turned. "We're not family. We're not even history. We're just people who once shared the same photograph." And then I left. No hug, no tears, just the sound of the front door closing behind me like the final page of a book I never agreed to write.
The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Thick, heavy, cream-colored. Same Dalton style. Even their legal threats came dressed in tradition. Inside were 27 pages of legal filings, petitions, declarations, and affidavits signed by both Douglas and Evelyn Dalton. In re, Isabella Tran, petition for temporary conservatorship. They were asking the court to declare me mentally unfit to manage my estate. I read every word twice. According to them, I was overworked, emotionally volatile, and incapable of making sound business decisions. The petition claimed I had no immediate family support, that I lived in emotional isolation, and demonstrated behavioral patterns consistent with obsessive grief response, whatever that meant. They cited no formal diagnosis, just vague references to my work habits and an unsigned psychological summary supposedly compiled by a wellness consultant I'd never met. And then came the kicker. They were requesting to be named as temporary financial guardians over my personal and professional assets, including any holdings in freight flow systems. It didn't matter that they had no legal stake in my company. It didn't matter that I hadn't spoken to them in over a year. They wanted control, and they thought they could get it by calling me crazy. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I called Nina. She showed up the next morning, black coffee in hand, binder already open. "They're playing dirty,"
she said, "and they're banking on one thing, that you'll crack, that you'll lose it. Yell, break something, say the wrong thing in front of the wrong person. That's their strategy." I nodded. "So what do we do?" "We build a counter case, fast. We dig into their finances, communications, their sudden interest in your mental state. We find out who wrote this fake report and we burn them with it, quietly, efficiently. And if they show up in court with crocodile tears, we show up with receipts." Within 48 hours, my team at Freight Flow was briefed. Miguel from finance flagged 2 suspicious inquiries into our internal reporting system, both traced back to an IP address in Houston. Evelyn's lawyer's office. Anna in operations found a former intern who said she'd been contacted by someone asking for quotes about my emotional volatility. She forwarded the emails. The sender, a paralegal from the same law firm that drafted the petition. It was all sloppy, but they didn't care. They thought I'd fold. I didn't. We filed our response within a week. The documents were clean, chronological, lethal. Exhibits included signed letters from Freight Flow board members, performance data showing consistent growth, emails with timestamps proving mental clarity, and even footage of a keynote I gave at a logistics summit 3 months ago. Calm, clear, composed. We ended with a single sentence. Miss Tran is not a victim. She is not unstable. She is not dependent. She is the CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics empire built from zero. The judge granted a hearing, set for 30 days from filing. And just like that, the Daltons had forced us into the spotlight. I hadn't spoken their name in public since Andrew's death. I'd stayed quiet, built in silence, healed in silence. But now they wanted war. So I opened the drawer, took out the ring Andrew had given me, and slipped it on. Not because I missed them, but because I remembered the promise I'd made the night they shut the door on me. You will never erase me again.
The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood. Too clean, too quiet, like a museum built to display other people's tragedies. I wore gray, simple, unbranded, no designer label, no statement piece. Just calm, composed, prepared. Douglas and Evelyn sat across the aisle, flanked by 2 lawyers in tailored suits. Evelyn wore black. Again. Like she was still in mourning, like she hadn't tried to bury me along with her son. The judge entered, female, mid-50s, eyes sharp, not warm. She looked like someone who'd seen too many families implode on her watch. Court is now in session. The Daltons' lawyer began. His voice was smooth, professional, insincere. Your Honor, my clients are here today not out of malice but concern, deep familial concern. They've watched their daughter-in-law spiral in the aftermath of tragic loss, overworking, isolating, ignoring basic needs. They fear for her well-being and the preservation of their late son's legacy. He gestured to Evelyn, who dabbed at invisible tears. They just want to help, to support, to ensure she doesn't self-destruct under the weight of grief. He handed over the psychological summary, unsigned, unlicensed, unverified. Then he called their first witness, a former Dalton family employee, housekeeper. She testified that I hadn't attended family dinners, that I always looked stressed and snapped at staff, that once I cried alone in the guest room after a phone call. That was the evidence. Next, a junior accountant from their company claimed Andrew's life insurance was paid by company funds and therefore, technically, belonged to the Dalton estate. He was wrong, but confident. Then Evelyn took the stand. She called me gifted, ambitious, too alone. She said she worried, said she tried to reconnect,
said I refused to speak, to grieve properly, claimed she once saw me staring at a wall for hours. Douglas added that Andrew often talked about wanting me to slow down, said I was married to my work, said he feared I'd lose myself if anything ever happened to me. They played their roles beautifully, but I didn't flinch. When it was my turn, Nina stood first. Your Honor, the picture being painted here is one of fragility, weakness, isolation, but we'd like to offer a correction. She submitted our exhibits: letters from Freight Flow board members, dated contracts, performance reviews, therapist notes confirming my mental fitness, and finally, a voice memo from Andrew himself, recorded 3 months before he died. In it, he spoke to a friend about the company. Isabella built it all, he said. I don't know how she does it. I just try to keep up. I'm proud of her, and if anything ever happens to me, I know she'll be just fine. The courtroom was silent. Then came our witness, a former Dalton employee, a paralegal. She'd left the law firm 2 weeks earlier. She testified under oath that Evelyn had requested a fake psych evaluation, that she was instructed to contact anyone who might paint me as unstable, that Douglas personally asked her to dig into Freight Flow's financials, illegally. The judge listened, took notes, said nothing. When I finally stood, I said only this. I lost my husband. I grieved privately. I worked publicly, and now I'm being punished for surviving the way I know how, by building. Evelyn didn't look at me. Douglas clenched his jaw. The judge recessed for review. As we left the courtroom, Nina leaned over. They overplayed their hand. I nodded. They didn't know who they were fighting.
The ruling came on a Thursday. It took the judge less than 20 minutes. The court finds no basis for temporary conservatorship. Ms. Tran is of sound mind and full legal capacity. The petition is dismissed in full. No hesitation, no conditions, just final. Evelyn's face didn't move. Douglas stared at the table. Their lawyers began collecting papers before the judge even stood up. Nina didn't smile. She didn't need to. We walked out without a word. The press waited, but I kept my head down, one hand on the ring Andrew gave me, the other on the door handle of Nina's car. By the time we reached the parking lot, I'd already decided. It was time to disappear, on my terms. That weekend, I flew to New York. Quiet trip, no press, no announcement. 3 days later, I signed the lease for a new headquarters. Freight Flow Systems, East Coast Division. Full glass building, 6th Avenue view. Sunlight across every floor. No ghosts. I moved in alone. No fanfare, no party, just a quiet rebirth. I changed my name, legally, fully, finally. Dropped Dalton from every document, every account, every login. Went back to the name that raised me, Tran. And then I sent one last envelope. Inside was a notarized letter. To Douglas and Evelyn. There will be no appeal, no contact, no further discussion. I am not your daughter-in-law. I am not your charity case, and I am not your asset. I am simply done. Isabella Tran. No signature, just the seal. That was the last time I ever spoke their memes. Months passed. Freight Flow scaled. Europe came calling. We landed our first international contract in Dublin, then Singapore, then back to the Midwest with a massive infrastructure grant. Investors lined up. The board doubled. I gave my first keynote under my real name. The applause felt different, not louder, just cleaner. At the end of the speech, someone asked what I'd learned. I told them, quiet power is still power. They clapped. I went home. That night, I lit a candle for Andrew.
placed it beside the photo I kept of us, the one no one ever saw. He wasn't in a tux. I wasn't in a dress. We were just two kids, laughing on a couch, eating noodles out of takeout boxes. I whispered, "You were right. I was fine." Then I blew out the candle. Later that year, I received a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was Evelyn's. Inside was a single sheet. Just one sentence. "I hope someday you can forgive us." I folded the paper once, dropped it in the shredder. Some pages don't deserve to be saved.
Some losses don't break you. They build something unstoppable. Isabella Tran's journal isn't just about success. It's about quiet resilience, about drawing clear lines in the sand, especially with the people who once called themselves family. In a world where powerful women are still labeled as unstable, where grief is weaponized and silence mistaken for weakness, Isabella never begged for recognition. She didn't fight with fire. She built. And she let her work speak louder than their doubt. When they returned, full of fake regrets and hidden agendas, she didn't lash out. She didn't need to. She simply walked away, not with anger, but with authority. Her story is a reminder for all of us. You don't need their apology to move on. You don't need their approval to become who you are. Forgiveness is a choice, but so is walking away in power and never looking back. Some endings don't need a full circle, just a clean break. If you made it this far, hit that like button to support stories like this. What would you do in Isabella's shoes? Would you forgive or walk away for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next story. Each week, we bring you real stories with real impact, where emotions, truth, and human resilience collide. Next video, meet a man who believed for 20 years that his father died in an accident, until he found an old voice recording buried inside a wrecked car. That story drops tomorrow, and trust us, you don't want to miss it.